Alan Carter couldn't believe his eyes. He blinked hard and leaned closer to the screen, his coffee forgotten beside his keyboard. The data patterns glowed blue in the dimly lit lunar observatory, casting shadows across his tired face. "This can't be right," he muttered to himself. He ran the analysis again. The lunar observatory was quiet at this late hour. Most of the staff had returned to their quarters, leaving Alan alone with his research. Outside the thick glass windows, the stark, lunar landscape stretched out, gray and silent under the stars. Earth hung in the black sky, a blue jewel that seemed so peaceful from this distance. Alan had been studying radiation patterns in ancient rock formations. It was routine research, something he'd done hundreds of times before. But tonight was different. The computer had flagged an anomaly in the data, strange energy signatures embedded within Earth's geological record. At first, he thought it was an error. But after the third analysis showed the same results, he began to consider other possibilities. These energy patterns were uniform, structured. They weren't random formations created by nature. They looked designed, created with purpose. And according to the dating analysis, they were millions of years old, far older than any known human civilization. Alan reached for the communication panel. "Kate," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "Kate, are you awake?" "You need to see this," Dr. Kate Miller responded almost immediately. "Alan, it's past midnight. This better be good." "It's better than good. It's impossible." 10 minutes later, Kate rushed into the lab, her dark hair hastily pulled back, wearing standard lunar base clothes, plain gray pants and a blue shirt with the Earth United Sciences patch. Her eyes were alert despite the hour. "Show me," she said without preamble. Alan pointed to his screen. "I was analyzing those deep core samples from the Arctic expedition. Look at these energy signatures." He pointed to a series of regular patterns in the data. "This section of rock is 3.7 million years old. But these they're not natural." Kate leaned in, her expression shifting from sleepy irritation to focused interest. "They look almost like circuit patterns," Alan finished for her. "Exactly, but that's impossible. Human civilization is only about 10,000 years old. Even the most ancient ruins we've found don't go back more than 30,000 years. Kate took over the console, her fingers flying across the controls. "Let me cross-reference with other samples." She pulled up data from other expeditions, deep sea core samples, desert excavations, even lunar soil samples. The lab fell silent except for the soft hum of the computers. Outside, the airlock cycled as the night maintenance crew went about their duties. "Alan," Kate said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "it's not just in the Arctic. Look." She displayed a global map showing dozens of points where the same energy signatures appeared. "These are everywhere, all at roughly the same geological period." Alan's mind raced. Could it be contamination? Some kind of natural phenomenon we don't understand? Kate shook her head. "The pattern is too regular, too consistent across different types of rock and in locations that had no contact with each other for millions of years." "Then what are we looking at?" Alan asked, though he was beginning to form an impossible theory. "I think," Kate said slowly, "we're looking at the remains of technology, advanced technology, from millions of years ago. The implications hung in the air between them. Since first contact with the Galactic Assembly 50 years ago, humans had been treated as newcomers to the cosmic community. The 14 alien species that made up the Assembly had civilizations thousands or even tens of thousands of years older than Earth's. They treated humans like children, barely out of their planetary cradle. "If you're right," Alan said, "then everything we know about human history is wrong." Kate nodded. "Not just human history, galactic history." The next 12 hours passed in a blur of activity. They brought in other specialists, ran more tests, verified their findings from multiple angles. By the time the lunar base's artificial day cycle began, they had compiled enough evidence to be certain millions of years ago Earth had been home to an advanced technological civilization, "We need to take this to Admiral Winters," Kate said as they prepared their report. Paul Winters was the head of Earth Space Command and the human representative to the Galactic Assembly's Security Council. Alan nodded, but his mind was already racing ahead. If Earth had an advanced civilization millions of years ago, what happened to it? And more importantly, could there be a connection to the other species in the assembly? They transmitted their findings to Earth with the highest security clearance. Within an hour, they received orders to return to Earth immediately. A shuttle was already being prepared. As they packed their research materials, Alan paused by the window for one last look at Earth. The blue planet seemed different to him now, mysterious in a way it hadn't been before. "What do you think happened to them?" he asked. "This ancient civilization?" Kate stood beside him. "I don't know. Some kind of disaster, maybe. Something that forced them to start over. Or maybe they left," Alan suggested. "Maybe they went to the stars." The shuttle ride back to Earth was tense with anticipation. They were met at the landing pad by a security team who escorted them directly to Space Command headquarters in Geneva. The building was an impressive blend of Earth architecture and alien influences, with sweeping curves and materials that seemed to change color depending on the angle of the sun. Admiral Paul Winters was waiting for them in his office. He was a tall man with short gray hair, and the steady gaze of someone who had seen more of the universe than most humans ever would. "Dr. Carter, Dr. Miller," he greeted them, his deep voice formal, but not unfriendly. "I've reviewed your preliminary findings. You realize what you're suggesting?" "Yes, sir," Alan replied. "We believe Earth had an advanced technological civilization millions of years ago, long before any of the current assembly species developed their civilizations." "That contradicts everything the assembly has told us about galactic history," the Admiral said. Kate straightened her shoulders. "The evidence is solid, sir. And there's more. We found similarities between these ancient energy signatures and certain technologies used by the Viridians and Solari." The Admiral's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Are you suggesting we don't have enough data to make firm conclusions?" Alan said carefully. "But it's possible that humans didn't just arise separately from the other species. We might have connections." The Admiral was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded once, decisively. "I'm authorizing a full investigation. This information stays classified for now. The political implications could be explosive." As they left the Admiral's office, Alan felt the weight of their discovery. The Galactic Assembly had always treated Earth as a newcomer, a primitive planet barely worth notice. But what if the truth was exactly the opposite? What if humans weren't latecomers to the galactic community at all? What if they were the first to rise? 1 week after their discovery, Alan and Kate found themselves on a military transport ship heading to the Galactic Assembly headquarters. The massive space station orbited a neutral star at the edge of what humans called the Orion Arm. It was built by the combined efforts of the 14 species that made up the assembly, with each section reflecting the architectural preferences of its builders. Admiral Winters sat across from them in the ship's conference room. The table between them was covered with data tablets and holographic projections of their research. "The President has authorized me to present your findings to the full assembly," the Admiral said. "But we need to be prepared for the reaction. The Viridians, in particular, base much of their cultural identity on being the oldest known civilization." Alan nodded. He had spent the past week studying the political structure of the assembly. The Viridians, with their translucent skin and 4 eyes, had been the first to develop faster-than-light travel. They had formed the assembly with the Solari, a species of energy beings, and gradually brought in other species as they discovered them. Humans were the newest members, only joining the assembly 50 years ago. "What about the genetic research?" Kate asked. She had been working with a team of biologists, comparing the DNA of humans with samples from other species. "Dr. Lee has found something interesting," the Admiral replied. He tapped a control, and a new image appeared above the table. It showed strands of DNA, some human, some alien. There are certain sequences that appear in modified forms across multiple species. They're dormant in humans but active in others. It suggests a common genetic ancestor, possibly millions of years ago. The implications were staggering. If humans shared genetic material with species from distant star systems, it meant that the ancient human civilization hadn't just developed advanced technology, they had spread throughout the stars. They might have been colonists, Alan said, his mind racing with possibilities. The ancient humans might have established colonies on other worlds, and over millions of years those colonies evolved differently based on their environments, Kate continued, excitement clear in her voice. They became the Viridians, the Solari, and the other species. The Admiral's expression remained serious. That's what the evidence suggests, but you understand what this means? We're not just challenging the Assembly's view of humans as newcomers. We're suggesting that humans might be the ancestors of all intelligent life in this part of the galaxy, the YAI. Ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a slight shudder. Outside the viewports, the Galactic Assembly Station came into view. It was enormous, a spinning wheel of metal and light with ships of various designs docked along its outer ring. "We're here," the Admiral said. "Remember, this is as much a diplomatic mission as a scientific one. The future of Earth's place in the Assembly could depend on how we present this information." They docked at the human section of the station. It was the smallest area, reflecting Earth's recent addition to the Assembly. Susan Howard, the Admiral's second-in-command, met them at the airlock. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and the steady gaze of someone who had spent decades in military service. "The Assembly Council has agreed to hear our presentation tomorrow," she informed them. "Ambassador Bennett is waiting for us in the Earth Embassy." They followed Commander Howard through the curved corridors of the station. The Earth section was designed to resemble the United Nations building in New York, with clean lines and natural light. But as they passed into other sections, the architecture changed dramatically. The Viridian area featured flowing organic shapes and surfaces that seemed to pulse with life. The Solari section had no solid walls at all, just fields of energy that somehow contained the atmosphere. Ambassador Linda Bennett welcomed them in the embassy's main conference room. She was in her 60s with silver hair and the poised confidence of a career diplomat. "I've reviewed your findings," she said after introductions were made. "If you're right, this will fundamentally alter our relationship with the Assembly. The Viridians have always treated us as children, barely out of our cradle. This evidence suggests we were walking among the stars when they were still evolving." "It's not about superiority," Kate said quickly. "It's about correcting a historical error." The ambassador nodded. "I understand that, but politics rarely cares about scientific nuance. The Viridians have built their position in the Assembly on being the elder species. They won't give that up easily." They spent the rest of the day preparing their presentation. Alan would explain the energy signatures found in Earth's geological record. Kate would present the genetic evidence. Admiral Winters would address the security and political implications. That night, Alan couldn't sleep. He stood at the viewport in his assigned quarters looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there were planets where the descendants of ancient humans had evolved into entirely new species. The thought was both exciting and humbling. A soft chime at his door broke his reverie. It was Kate. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked with a small smile. Alan shook his head. "I keep thinking about what happened to them. The original civilization. Something must have gone wrong. Some disaster that forced them to abandon Earth." "Maybe," Kate said. "Or maybe they chose to leave, to seed the stars with life. Either way, their descendants came back. The Viridians, the Solari, all of them. They came back to Earth and found us, humans who had rebuilt civilization from nothing, with no memory of what we once were." The next morning, they entered the great hall of the Assembly. It was a vast chamber with seating arranged in concentric circles. Each section was designed to accommodate the physical needs of a different species. The Viridians sat on floating platforms. The Solari hovered in columns of light. The aquatic Nerae floated in transparent tanks of water. In the center was a circular platform where speakers could address the assembly. Ambassador Bennett led Alan, Kate, and Admiral Winters to this platform. Arrayed around them were the representatives of 14 species, all watching with various biological expressions of curiosity. The Viridian ambassador, Zorith, spoke first. His voice was translated by the communication system that allowed all species to understand each other. Earth has requested this extraordinary session to present new scientific findings, he said. His four eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of skepticism in Viridian body language. We recognize Ambassador Bennett. Linda stepped forward. Her voice was clear and confident as it echoed through the hall. Distinguished representatives of the assembly, we come before you today with evidence that will change our understanding of our shared history. Earth has not always been the home of a young civilization. Once, millions of years ago, it was the center of an advanced technological society, one that may have given rise to all of us. A murmur ran through the assembly. Alan took a deep breath. It was time to present their evidence. Time to show the galaxy that Earth wasn't a newcomer after all. They were the first to rise. Alan stood before the assembly and took a deep breath. The vast chamber was silent as all eyes, visual sensors, and other sensory organs focused on him. He activated the holographic display, and a three-dimensional image of Earth appeared above the central platform. "This is Earth as we know it today," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "But what we've discovered changes everything we thought we knew about our planet's history." The hologram changed, showing the energy signatures they had discovered in Earth's geological layers. Alan explained in simple terms how these patterns were clearly artificial, created by intelligent beings with advanced technology. "These energy signatures are 3.7 million years old," he said. "That's long before any current human civilization. It's even before modern humans evolved." A murmur ran through the assembly. Ambassador Zorith of the Viridians raised a slender arm, his translucent skin pulsing with agitation. "Are you suggesting that some other species visited your planet in the past?" he asked. "Perhaps the Solari. They were spacefaring before us." The Solari representative, a being of pure energy named Ilara, flickered in what seemed like surprise. The translation system conveyed her thoughts. "The Solari achieved space travel only 50,000 years ago," she said. "None of our records indicate visits to Earth at such an ancient time." Alan shook his head. "The evidence suggests this wasn't a visitation. These energy signatures are found throughout Earth's crust, on all continents, and even in deep sea formations. This technology was everywhere. Earth was home to an advanced civilization millions of years ago." Kate stepped forward next. The hologram changed to show genetic comparisons. "We've analyzed DNA from humans and compared it to genetic samples from other assembly species," she explained. "We've found remarkable similarities in certain sequences. These similarities are too specific to be coincidental." She highlighted sections of DNA that were nearly identical across multiple species. "These sequences are dormant in humans but active in modified forms in other species. The most likely explanation is that all these species share a common ancestor." The hall erupted in noise as representatives began speaking to each other. Ambassador Bennett raised her hands for quiet. "We understand this is surprising information," she said, "but there's more. Admiral Winters will explain the historical implications." Paul Winters stepped forward, his military uniform standing out among the diplomatic attire of the others. "Based on all available evidence, we believe that millions of years ago, Earth was home to an advanced human civilization that achieved spacefaring capability. They established colonies on many worlds. Some disaster occurred, we don't know what, and the Earth-based civilization collapsed. Humans on Earth had to rebuild from nothing." He paused to let this sink in. Meanwhile, the colonial populations continued to develop on their own. Over millions of years, they adapted to their environments, evolving into different species. We believe these species eventually became what we now know as the members of the Galactic Assembly. Complete silence filled the chamber. Then chaos erupted. Delegates began shouting questions, objections, and demands for more evidence. The Viridian section was particularly vocal, with Ambassador Zorith visibly agitated. "This is absurd," Zorith finally said when order was restored. "You expect us to believe that your primitive species preceded all of us? That we somehow descended from human colonies? Where is your proof beyond a few energy readings and genetic similarities?" Alan understood the resistance. The Viridians had built their entire identity around being the eldest spacefaring race, the founders of the Assembly. This revelation threatened that position. "We're not claiming superiority," Alan said. "We're simply presenting the evidence we've found. There's more. We've identified fragments of an ancient human language in the root structures of 12 assembly languages, including Viridian." He displayed linguistic analyses showing common patterns across different languages, patterns that could be traced back to ancient Earth languages. Ambassador Bennett stepped forward again. "We don't bring this information to claim superiority," she clarified. "We bring it to correct a historical error and to suggest that perhaps we are all more connected than we realized." The Solari representative Ilara floated forward. Her energy form seemed calmer than the agitated Viridians. "If this is true," she said, her thoughts translated into words, "it changes our understanding of not only Earth's place in the Assembly, but of our own origins. I propose we form a scientific commission to study these findings further." Several other species indicated agreement. The Nerae, aquatic beings with 4 arms and silvery skin, supported the Solari's proposal. Even some of the younger species, like the insectoid Krell, seemed intrigued rather than offended by the possibility. But the Viridians remained opposed. Zorith's skin had darkened to a deep purple, a sign of strong emotion. "These claims are outrageous," he said. "Humans have been part of the Assembly for only 50 years. You've barely mastered faster than light travel. Now you claim to be the ancestor species of all intelligent life? This is clearly a political ploy to gain influence." Admiral Winters responded calmly. "We invite independent verification of our findings. All our research data is available for review. We seek only the truth." The debate continued for hours. Some species were receptive, others skeptical, and the Viridians openly hostile. Finally, the Assembly leader, a neutral AI called the Arbiter, intervened. "This matter requires thorough investigation," the Arbiter said. "A commission will be formed, with representatives from all species to examine the evidence. Until then, no official position will be taken by the Assembly." As they left the Great Hall, Alan felt both relief and concern. They had presented their findings, but the political battle was just beginning. That could have gone worse. Kate said quietly as they walked back to the Earth section. "It could have gone better too," Admiral Winters replied. "The Viridians will fight this every step of the way." Ambassador Bennett nodded. "They have too much to lose. Their status as the eldest species grants them significant influence in Assembly decisions." "What happens now?" Alan asked. "Now," the Ambassador said, "we gather more evidence and we prepare for resistance. The Commission will want to visit Earth to see the evidence firsthand. They'll want to examine the geological samples themselves. And the Viridians will look for any way to discredit our findings," Commander Howard added. She had been silent throughout the presentation, watching the reactions of the various species. That night, Alan couldn't sleep again. He walked through the Earth section of the station, thinking about the day's events. The looks on the faces of the Assembly representatives, or their equivalent of faces, ranged from shock to disbelief to anger to fascination. He found himself at a viewport looking out at the stars. Kate joined him a few minutes later. "Quite a day," she said. Alan nodded. "I wonder if they felt it too. The ancient humans when they first looked out at the stars." "They must have," Kate replied. "That drive to explore, to understand. It's part of what makes us human. Maybe it's part of what makes the Viridians and Solari what they are too, even after millions of years of evolution." "If we're right," Alan said, "then we're all family, in a way. Distant cousins who forgot they were related." Kate smiled. "A family. Reunion 3.7 million years in the making." Behind them, a soft alert chimed. Commander Howard's voice came over the communication system. "Dr. Carter, Dr. Miller, We've received a message from Earth. Something's happening at the archaeological sites. Where the energy signatures were detected, they're activating. Alan and Kate stared at each other as Commander Howard's words sank in. Activating? What does that mean? Alan asked. We don't know yet, Howard replied. But the Admiral wants you both back on Earth immediately. A shuttle is being prepared. Within hours, they were on their way back to Earth. Admiral Winters and Ambassador Bennett stayed behind to deal with the political fallout of their presentation. Commander Howard accompanied Alan and Kate on the shuttle. What exactly is happening? Kate asked as the shuttle broke free of the assembly station's artificial gravity. Commander Howard brought up a holographic display. Energy readings from all the sites where you found the ancient signatures have increased by 400% in the last 6 hours. Something is powering up after millions of years of dormancy. The image showed multiple locations on Earth: the Arctic, the Sahara Desert, the Mariana Trench, and several others. All were glowing with energy that hadn't been there before. Any idea what triggered it? Alan asked, though he already suspected the answer. The leading theory is that our scan somehow activated a dormant system, Howard said, like turning on an old computer by checking its circuits. The journey back to Earth took 12 hours. They landed at a military base in Nevada, where they were immediately taken to a command center deep underground. Scientists and military personnel moved quickly between workstations, studying readings from around the world. Dr. Greg Davis, a geologist who had been part of their research team, met them as they entered. His normally calm face was flushed with excitement. "You're not going to believe this," he said without preamble. "The energy signatures aren't just increasing, they're changing the surrounding environment. The site in the Sahara has cooled by 20 degrees. There's actual vegetation growing around it now." He showed them footage from drones flying over the Sahara site. What had been empty desert was now sprouting green plants in a perfect circle around a glowing point of blue light. "The same thing is happening at all the sites," Greg continued. "It's like they're terraforming their immediate surroundings. Or returning them to what they once were," Kate suggested. The next few days were a blur of activity. Teams were dispatched to each site with strict orders, not to interfere, but to observe and report. Alan and Kate divided their time between the command center and video conferences with the scientific commission the assembly had formed. Not all the news was good. Reports came in of Vridian ships entering Earth's solar system without permission. They claimed to be conducting their own investigation, but Earth's defense forces were put on alert. On the 4th day, a breakthrough came from the Mariana Trench site. The underwater research vessel Deep Explorer had found something embedded in the ocean floor, a structure that was clearly artificial. As they watched the live feed from the vessel, Alan felt his heart racing. "That's a door," he said, pointing to a rectangular section of the structure. "That's an entrance." The captain of the Deep Explorer confirmed Alan's observation. "We're detecting an air pocket beyond that panel. After millions of years underwater, there's still a sealed chamber. In there." Permission was granted for the Deep Explorer to open the door. As it swung open, cameras captured the interior of a room untouched by time. The walls were covered with symbols that resembled no known human language, yet somehow felt familiar. In the center of the room was a console with a flat surface. As the camera moved closer, the surface lit up, displaying a star map of the galaxy. "It's some kind of archive," Kate whispered. Similar discoveries were made at other sites around the world. Hidden chambers, preserved technology, data archives, all protected by technology so advanced it had survived millions of years. Meanwhile, in space, tension was growing. The Vridian ships had moved closer to Earth, ignoring warnings from Earth's defense fleet. Admiral Winters, still at the assembly station, was working frantically to prevent a confrontation. On the 5th day, something unexpected happened. At each site, the energy readings suddenly spiked, and communication was established between them. It was as if they had become aware of each other after eons of sleep. At the Nevada Command Center, a message appeared on every screen. The symbols were unlike any known language, yet everyone present suddenly understood their meaning. "We have awakened. The children have remembered." Alan and Kate exchanged glances. "It's talking about us." Alan said. Humanity. We're the children who have remembered our past. More messages followed, information flooding into Earth's computer systems faster than anyone could process it. Star charts, scientific data, historical records. The collective knowledge of the ancient civilization was being shared. And then came the most startling revelation of all. The ancient humans hadn't died out. They hadn't been wiped out by some disaster. They had left Earth deliberately, seeding colonies across the stars. But they had left behind these archives, set to awaken when their descendants reached a certain level of technological advancement. Why would they leave? Commander Howard asked, staring at the data pouring across the screens. It was Kate who found the answer in the flood of information. They were dying, she said quietly. Their civilization was advanced, but they had developed genetic problems from their technology. They couldn't survive on Earth anymore, so they used genetic engineering to create versions of themselves that could survive on different worlds. The Viridians, the Solari, all of them, Alan realized. They're not just our distant cousins. They're what we designed ourselves to become. The archives say there's one more site, Greg said, studying the data. One we didn't detect before. It's deep beneath the Antarctic ice. While plans were made to investigate the Antarctic site, the situation in space deteriorated. The Viridian ships had formed a blockade, preventing other assembly vessels from reaching Earth. Ambassador Bennett reported that the Viridian delegation was claiming the archives were fake, a human plot to gain power. But not all species were convinced by the Viridian claims. The Solari in particular had sent their own ships to observe the phenomenon on Earth. We need to get to that Antarctic site, Alan said. Whatever is there might be the key to resolving this standoff. Commander Howard nodded. A team is already being assembled. You and Dr. Miller will lead the scientific contingent. As they prepared for the mission to Antarctica, Alan couldn't help but feel they were on the verge of an even greater discovery. The ancient civilization hadn't just left behind information. They had left behind a message for their descendants, scattered across 100 worlds and 1,000,000 years of evolution. The message was clear. They had called Earth a newcomer, but humans were the first to rise. And now it was time for the children of Earth to come home. The journey to Antarctica was tense. Alan and Kate flew on a military transport with a team of scientists and soldiers. Outside, the sky was filled with both Earth ships and alien vessels watching from orbit. The Viridian blockade had grown, but so had the number of ships from other species. The Solari, the Nerae, and several others had sent observers. We're approaching McMurdo Station, the pilot announced. Below them, the vast white expanse of Antarctica stretched in all directions. They would land at the research base and then travel to the coordinates provided by the activated archives. It was the middle of the Antarctic summer, which meant daylight 24 hours a day. Still, the temperature was well below freezing as they exited the plane. The site is 50 miles from here, Commander Howard told them. We'll take snow vehicles. The convoy set out across the ice. Satellite images had shown nothing unusual at the coordinates, just flat ice. But the data from the archives was clear. Something important was buried there. They reached the location by evening. At first glance, there was nothing to see. But instruments detected an energy signature similar to the other sites, only much stronger. It's below us, Greg said, checking his equipment. About 200 feet down. How do we reach it? Kate asked. Before anyone could answer, the ground vibrated beneath them. A low hum filled the air. The snow and ice began to shift, not melting, but somehow moving aside, creating a perfect circular opening 50 feet across. Everyone back, Commander Howard ordered. The team retreated to a safe distance and watched as a passage formed through the ice, spiraling down into darkness. When the movement stopped, Alan stepped closer to the edge. Lights had appeared along the walls of the passage, glowing with a soft blue light. The way down was clear. We need to go down there, he said. Commander Howard nodded. A small team only. Dr. Carter, Dr. Miller, you two have been at the center of this from the beginning. Take Dr. Davis and 2 security officers. They descended the spiral passage carefully. The air grew warmer as they went deeper, but not uncomfortably. So, after 10 minutes, they reached the bottom and found themselves in a vast chamber carved from the ice and rock beneath Antarctica. In the center of the chamber stood a structure unlike anything they had seen at the other sites. It was a perfect sphere, 30 feet across, hovering several feet above the ground. Its surface shifted with patterns of light that seemed almost alive. "What is it?" one of the security officers asked. "Some kind of main control system, I think," Alan replied. "The other sites were just outposts. This feels like the heart of the network." As they approached, a section of the sphere's surface changed, forming a doorway. Inside, they could see a smaller chamber with a single platform at its center. "Should we go in?" Greg asked nervously. Kate stepped forward. "That's why we're here." The 5 of them entered the sphere. The platform in the center had a single depression in the shape of a human hand. Kate looked at Alan. "Together?" she suggested. They placed their hands on the depression at the same time. The sphere hummed with energy, and the interior walls became transparent. Beyond them, they could see not the ice chamber, but the stars, as if they were suddenly in space, looking out at the galaxy. A voice spoke in their minds. It was neither male nor female, neither young nor old, but it felt deeply familiar. "The children have returned. The circle nears completion." Images flashed around them. Earth as it was millions of years ago, a thriving world with technology beyond anything humanity had achieved since. They saw massive ships leaving the planet, carrying thousands of genetically modified humans to distant stars. They felt the sorrow of those left behind, too changed by their technology to survive long-term, choosing to guide their children from afar rather than join them. "Why did you separate us?" Alan asked aloud. "Why create different species that wouldn't recognize each other?" The voice answered gently. "Diversity was strength. Each world required different adaptations. The plan was always to reunite when all had grown strong in their own ways." More images appeared. The genetic modifications that had created the Viridians, adapted for a high-gravity world with toxic air. The Solari, designed to live on a star's surface. The Neri, made for ocean worlds. All started as humans, all changed to survive hostile environments that no single form could inhabit. "It is time for the family to remember," the voice said. "Time for the children to come home." Outside the sphere in orbit around Earth, the standoff between ships had reached a critical point. The Viridian vessels had powered weapons, threatening to destroy the human deception. But before any shots could be fired, the sphere in Antarctica pulsed with energy. Every ship in orbit, every communication device on Earth, every screen throughout the assembly suddenly displayed the same images that Alan and Kate were seeing. The truth of their shared origin, impossible to deny. In the assembly hall, Ambassador Zorith of the Viridians stood frozen as he watched his own species' creation from human stock. Ambassador Bennett watched him with sympathy, understanding the shock of having one's entire cultural identity challenged. Back in Antarctica, the sphere continued its message. It wasn't just a historical record. It was an invitation. The ancient humans had not merely left a message, they had left a path forward. "The divisions were temporary," the voice explained, "a necessary step in our evolution. Now it is time to reunite, to combine the strengths each branch has developed." The sphere showed one final image, a vision of the future where humans and the 14 species of the assembly worked together, sharing their unique adaptations and perspectives. Not with humans in charge, but with all species as equals, recognizing their common origin and shared destiny. As the vision faded, the sphere settled gently to the ground. A panel opened, revealing a small object that looked like a crystal. "The key to our legacy," the voice said. "The knowledge of how to reunite what was divided, not to make all the same again, but to allow each to share their gifts with the others." Alan picked up the crystal carefully. "What happens now?" he asked. "That is for you to decide," the voice replied. "The children have grown. The parents must step aside." The sphere went silent, its purpose fulfilled. But the crystal in Alan's hand glowed with potential. In orbit, the Viridian ships had powered down their weapons. Communication channels were flooded with messages from all species of the assembly. The revelation had shocked them all, but it had also opened a door to something new. As they left the chamber and returned to the surface, Kate looked up at the sky where the distant ships were visible as points of light against the Antarctic day. They called Earth a newcomer, she said softly. Alan nodded, the crystal secure in his hand. But we were the first to rise. And now maybe we can all rise together. 2 weeks later, the assembly convened in an emergency session. Representatives of all 15 species, the 14 original members and humanity, gathered to discuss the implications of what was now being called the Antarctic Revelation. Ambassador Bennett presented the crystal to the assembly. Our ancestors left this for all of us, she said. Not just for humans, but for every species that began as human. It contains knowledge that belongs to all of us. Ambassador Zorth, his initial hostility replaced by a more complex mix of emotions, stepped forward. The Viridian people have prided themselves on being first, he said. It is difficult to learn we were not. But perhaps being first is not what matters. Perhaps what matters is where we go from here. The Solari representative, Alara, glowed brightly in agreement. We have lived as separate species for millions of years. We cannot undo that separation overnight. But we can begin to remember that we are family. As the assembly debated the path forward, Alan and Kate watched from Earth via video link. They had done what they set out to do. They had corrected a historical error. But they had accomplished something far greater as well. They had reunited a family that had been separated for millions of years. Not bad for a couple of scientists who were just studying radiation patterns, Kate said with a smile. Alan looked at the screen where the 15 species of the assembly, all children of Earth, were finding their way toward a new understanding. They might still have a long way to go, he said. So do we, Kate replied. But at least now we're all walking the same path.